Today, I'm going to take you through an update of something I popped in my screen in the past hour and a half. So I had to think about it and think about the relevance of it. For those who can't handle conspiracy, I think you should stop right here because I'm going to mention a name that is very closely tied with conspiracy theories. A lot of the mainstream media doesn't like him because they think or perceive that he shares a lot of information that is purely speculative. So, as you can see, I'm setting the stage for what is someone's opinion. However, what I have done is I've gone back to what he has mentioned and made some extrapolations. So he was making reference to a specific virus that could have been used as bioterrorism. And so I'll let you listen to the first part of what he said, and then I will go into my own interpretation of what is happening around the science. Please let me know if you can hear this. So let's go ahead with these words.
Of going, clearly they're not going to do it again. Well, bad news for everybody. Tom Ridge, that's right, the Secretary of Homeland Security, when it was first established under the Bush administration, collaborated with a group of people to come up with a scenario in which they are calling for, and listen carefully to what I'm going to say, the death of 280,000 Americans on July 4th, 2025. In 1 month from today, there is a plan that involves the murder of 280,000 Americans on a single day. And the best.
So I'll pause it right here. And as I said, for those who have listened to what he has said, you can reflect on what he has said over the past 5 years. But he made a point about this document. And he made a reference to the 4th of July, 2025. If you're just listening in the future, this is the day. So hopefully nothing that I say here will be relevant in the future. However, it did make me think carefully. Now, the reason why I first thought about it was just because there was also a similar kind of coincidence that happened before the COVID-19 pandemic. And for those people who are not aware of what I'm talking about, it is this event here, tabletop exercise event 201. It was at Johns Hopkins, and it was in partnership with the World Economic Forum and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And it took place on October 18th, 2019. And I will make sure that you can see that a little bit more closely. And what they were running through is that they were doing a simulated series of dramatic scenario-based discussions about the potential future. And it was just about events that they came up about, and I'll come second, was something that was very similar to what happened with COVID, except that they picked Brazil as their scenario, but it was spread of a viral agent, which would then spread across the world and cause huge damage to finances and population health. So it was purely coincidental that in October of 2019, they almost predicted what would happen in December of 2019. And that's not a conspiracy. It's just the fact that, coincidentally, they thought about it. Now, whether or not there was any correlation, we don't know. And for those people who still are not aware that we haven't really found the natural vector for COVID-19, and there are still questions about the origin, you'll understand why that question has some relevance. But let's not get into that. The mere point is that it seems coincidental that prior to one of the most significant events that could have happened in a century, there seemed to be an exercise or almost a discussion about it. And so this leads me back to what is concerning me now. So when we look at what he had mentioned there, is that he had mentioned this national blueprint for biodefense. First, look at the date, April of 2024. And he was highlighting that in April of 2024, again, they played out a scenario. Okay, so it's important to note that this is just a scenario. They were saying, what happens if? What would we do? They made lots of references to COVID, but interestingly, they made it in reference to the fact that there was nothing in there that mentioned about the origins outside of the fact that it was a zoonotic pandemic. And it's interesting that they took that position in April, but the White House changed that position when the Trump administration came in. They think that this was more likely to be lab origin. But again, we can argue about that at a later time. Here is the scenario that they had predicted. So this was, as I said, this is a scenario. And they said that 9 weeks ago, a nation or terrorist group, they didn't know who, attacked the nation's capital and other US cities with biological weapons as they celebrated Independence Day. And that agent, in the 9 week period, killed over 280,000 Americans and at least 400,000 in a single day. And it led to a lot of animals dying as well. These numbers will increase as the disease spread, and many of the colleagues and staff in Congress fell ill and died. And then other nations were targeted. And so you can see that that was what they were almost predicting or looking at a scenario for. So it was purely a scenario. And if you're just joining, kind of looking at the fact that they did this kind of scenario prediction in October of 2019 with regards to a virus like COVID. And coincidentally, in December, we have a pandemic, except it didn't start in Brazil, it started in China. And now we have a similar kind of prediction or exercise. It's not a prediction, it is purely a scenario, but it could be again strangely replicated. Now, what caught my attention, and this is the bit that's important, is in that scenario, they confirmed the Nipah virus causing the disease. I don't know or didn't know what this was. So part of what I did is a little bit of research around it, and I'm kind of updating you as to what this is and why I think this could be relevant. And it says here, the virus, which in nature does not spread easily among people, was genetically modified to increase its ability to spread from animal to animal, animal to person, and person to person, while still retaining a mortality rate of over 40%. This line is where it is very, very important. What they are saying here is that in this scenario, somebody adjusted a naturally occurring virus so that it had the capability of spreading very easily person to person, animal to person, etc. Now, I'm sorry to say, but again, if I'm not mistaken, that sounds very much like COVID as well. This virus doesn't normally spread as easily as it has in this pandemic. And you may wonder, what is the reason why? But we're going to come to that because I'm tying the two things together. So the first thing I'm going to do is give you a little bit of insight into this virus, the Nipah virus. It is a deadly zoonotic virus, okay? Its origin is in fruit bats, which can then spread to pigs. And then if it infects pigs, it can then spread to humans. First identified in 1998 in Malaysia. Coincidentally, SARS-CoV-1 or SARS-CoV was first identified in China in 2003. So it's only 5 years apart. Somebody is clearly looking for these things. Natural host is a fruit bat, and it has a mortality rate of 40 to 75%. So this is no joke of a virus. It's more like I think Ebola it has a higher mortality rate, but just the same, it is very, very serious. Then we have, it spreads usually from infected animals and fluids, And they did have an outbreak in Malaysia. They had one in Bangladesh. They had one in India, but it usually contained itself by killing the pigs and isolating the people because it doesn't spread that easily. You can get it from contaminated food. And as they said, person to person via droplets is possible, but not easy to do. And it has been identified by the World Health Organization as a priority pathogen with pandemic potential. So it is a very serious virus. But again, as with many viruses that exist, they don't easily shift from one mode of transmission to another. That usually is an important trajectory. A few more details with regards to this, and this is around where I am very concerned with regards to the research around the science. Now follow this bit carefully. If this was spreading, it targets the lungs, respiratory distress, blood vessels, so there can be inflammation, clotting, and bleeding, and the brain with encephalitis. And it evades the immune system. It blocks interferon, exactly like COVID as well, and it causes cells to come together, avoiding detection. Again, very much like COVID. And you have rapid multi-organ failure with limited treatment options. Now, what's very important here, and this is where I am concerned, because I have been calling for autopsies for years now. It seems inconvenient. Nobody seems interested. And all I'm saying is very simple. We know what happened when COVID caused death early in the pandemic. We have thousands of autopsies. My question was simple. If you had someone who was already vaccinated and died with severe COVID, is the mechanism of death the same? Is it different? If it is different, what is different? And that is basically the simple question. Because from my perspective, looking out for autoimmunity, I want to see if there are characteristics there that suggest that reinfection is triggering immune responses that damage tissue. That's the essence of what I've been looking at. For some reason, nobody wants to do autopsies. I don't know why, because the kind of questions I'm asking can only be clearly identified through autopsy. Now, my concern is that if there is even any chance of some virus that does something like what has been described here, targeting the lungs, blood vessels, the brain, this is exactly what I am looking for with COVID and reinfection and the links in terms of vaccination. So suddenly, if you have a new virus that comes along, how are we going to differentiate whether this could be COVID related damage or this new virus? That's a big problem. So, based on my extrapolation, it seems that we have a gap in research that has been pushed aside because the outcomes of the research could be inconvenient. It's kind of fitting like how they're destroying the data samples in Australia or attempting to. Hopefully, they will stop it. We need this data. We need to understand what happened. We need to be able to prepare for the future, especially with the disease. Here's the final point. Now, I will take you back, before I say this, I will take you back to what they said in the document here. And if you're just joining me, this is a biodefense document preparing for a scenario that could involve the Nipah virus. And this virus, which in nature does not spread easily among people, was genetically modified to increase its ability to spread. This is what you have to note. We come back now to the pandemic and we look at what happened in the pandemic. Here is the reality. This is an example of the viral spike protein. And you can see the cut section of the virus here. The spike proteins on the top, the blue ones. In red here, these are the membrane proteins, envelope proteins in orange, and in blue, the nucleocapsid proteins. This is a kind of blown up view of the spike protein. This side here is where ACE2 will bind. This is embedded in the envelope of the virus. But this little out protrusion here is what we call a furin cleavage site. Now, it's very important to note that this is not normal on a human coronavirus. Okay? Let me rephrase that. Let me just say it again. The furin cleavage site is not present on human coronaviruses. On some, I think, bat coronaviruses, it can have it. But this furin cleavage site is exceptionally important in the infectivity of SARS-CoV-2. Without it, we wouldn't have had the pandemic occurring because of the method that it uses to spread and cause infection. So this furin cleavage site is critical. Now, it's just coincidental, again, that the furin cleavage site that is on this coronavirus happens to have a patent on it from a company that benefited from the pandemic. But remember, that is purely coincidental. It's a 1 in a trillion chance that it can happen naturally, but it doesn't matter. That was a coincidence, and you should not in any way think about this as being supporting the line of thinking that this could be lab made. Very important. So as I said, that furin cleavage site is critical, not normal, and it could be relevant because then when I looked at the principles with regards to this Nipah virus, I thought and I asked, if one put a furin cleavage site on that virus, would it help the infectivity? Absolutely. So this is what we would potentially be facing. When you look at the difference it makes to SARS-CoV-2, and this was taken from, I'll show you which paper just in case. It was taken from Mechanisms of SARS-CoV-2 Entry into Cells. Nature Review this was where this was done, but the image is better here. And it shows you the two entry mechanisms for the virus. On this side here is the virus in combination with the furin cleavage site and TMPRSS2 binding and just releasing the viral RNA inside the cell. Omicron tends to use this mechanism where it binds to ACE2 and has to go into an endosome. This is the normal route for the Nipah virus as well, but it's slower. It's not as quick. And if you had a furin cleavage site, suddenly you would have far better spread if you was on another virus. So I think what they're suggesting is that this Nipah virus could be adjusted so that it has better infectivity. Then, based on what the good person had said, you notice that I'm not saying his name. You have to know who he is to understand if you had watched at the beginning. He mentioned that it could be spread at a particular time where it's not easy to detect, and it would be blamed as the cause of massive death and disease, possibly on some country that needed to be attacked by the US. I don't know. And the point is that we are at a time where the combination, I know this is the other important bit, we already have COVID circulating, and COVID already damages the immune system. If you then have on top of that another virus that does direct viral damage, so this is the difference I say between COVID and many other viruses. COVID triggers the immune system to do damage to itself. That's the cytokine storm. Most other viruses do the damage directly. They infect the cells, they destroy them. And so in that circumstance, you then have a situation where a virus that does direct damage could be spreading alongside COVID, which does immune damage. That's the perfect storm. I mean, at this point, I do wonder if anything is possible. And it may seem, and this is one of those times where you think to yourself, I hope that this kind of thinking isn't real, but it is possible based on what we have seen over the past 5 years. For those who have just joined us, this is from the National Blueprint for Biodefense, Immediate Action Needed Against Biological Threats. It talked about a scenario in this document which involved the death of a large number of people. As you can see, it's quite a large document. And this could be significant. And as a final point here, I will let you hear a little bit more from the man himself, and you can listen to a little bit more as to what he said. He was who clued me into this, so I'm appreciative that I got a chance to think about it. So let's hear what else he had to say.
Best part of it is they're going to blame a foreign actor for it, except for a tiny little problem. Yeah, if you hop down to page 9 of that National Blueprint for Biodefense, Seth, and highlight the first major paragraph under the U.S. House of Representatives, let's go ahead, for the sake of everybody on here, make sure that we read it. We were attacked, and we don't know who did the attack, but the infectious agent they used killed 280,000 Americans and infected at least 400,000 throughout the country on a single day, in addition to 200,000 dead and 800,000 sickened animals. Now, if you scroll up for a moment, Seth, and keep going until I tell you to stop, just keep scrolling, scroll up, scroll up, scroll up. What you're going to find when you get to this page, oh, there you go. Look at ex officio members. If you look at the ex officio members of this particular committee, there are 2 names that I want to call your attention to: Gerald W. Parker and George Post. Those names are names that people should be familiar with, but they are not. These are veterinary scientists and gain-of-function scientists who have done an enormous amount of work in a variety of pathogens. George Post famously was very much involved in the Arizona contribution to the gain-of-function research that brought us COVID-19 and all of those kinds of things.
So at this point, I paused. As I said, this gentleman is not very much appreciated in mainstream because the suspicion is that he spreads a lot of conspiracies. What he's talking about here is a real document, and it's clear that it is just a scenario. There is no evidence that it is necessarily going to happen. My concern is that any kind of situation that exacerbates what is going on already with COVID circulation could mask everything. You'll never be able to figure out what happened. So from my conspiratorial point of view, I am concerned that if another virus is introduced into this current situation, we will never have any clarity about what happened in the pandemic. The last chance is for us to get as many autopsies as possible. I have no idea how this can be done because there seems to be no interest from the scientific medical research community to understand at all what has happened so far and why so many people are still sick. Still a lot of work to do, but as I said, I keep you updated with the latest things, and you can make your own mind up as to what to believe. Have a good evening.